be kind of cool. All right, so Does Moral Theory Corrupt the Youth by Kieran, Setiya in Philosophical Topics from 2010 for our buddy Aristotle. My title is adapted from Elizabeth Anscombe's infamous 1957 radio talk, Does Oxford Moral Philosophy Corrupt Youth? Like, it was cool to hear me read Kafka's aphorisms. Yeah, that was a good idea back when I did that. It's hard to have good ideas like that, though. So Anscombe's answer was no. It merely reiterates their already depraved opinions. Unlike Anscombe, I will not be concerned with such... Okay, you know what? I am screwing this up. I have to zoom in. Yeah, why does this happen? Right, gotta go. 275. Not 2,750. Is that good or is this too much? Let's see. Okay, there we go. So, all right. Okay, so yeah. Unlike Anscombe, I will not be concerned with such points of method as the advice to concentrate on examples which are either banal or fantastic, or with what she calls consequentialism. We begin instead with some remarks by Annette Bayer in Theory and Reflective Practices that appear to answer yes, moral theory does corrupt youth. The obvious trouble with our contemporary attempts to use moral theory to guide action is the lack of agreement on which theory to apply. The standard undergraduate course in, say, medical ethics or business ethics acquaints the students with a variety of theories and shows the difference in the guidance they give. We, in effect, give courses in comparative moral theory, and like courses in any comparative religion, their oh no, all right, I have to fix this. Let's just go to 2. So their usual effects on the student is loss of faith in any of the alternatives presented. We produce relativists and moral skeptics, persons who have been convinced by our teachings that whatever they do in some difficult situation, some moral theory will condone it, another will condemn it. The usual and the sensible reaction to this confrontation with a variety of conflicting theories, all apparently have some plausibility and respectable credentials, is to turn to a guide that speaks more univocally, to turn from morality to self-interest or mere convenience. In attempting to increase moral reflectiveness, we may be destroying what conscience there once was in those we teach. You think that's true? By giving people options, you confuse them so bad that they're just like, you know what, I'm going to do whatever the fuck I want. I'm kind of like a little doubtful in saying, hey, look, the fact that like we don't have a good answer, does that actually corrupt the youth, saying we don't know exactly what the answer is? I mean, I don't know where the author is going here, but that does seem like kind of what this bit of quote is. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. What is the alternative here? Like just being dogmatic, being like, oh, yo, pick this theory and then it'll be good. I don't know. Okay, this passage may seem to contain some not-so-harmless exaggeration. To begin with, the coldest comfort, we are entitled to wonder whether students of medical or business ethics always take it quite so seriously. Aristotle says, anyone who's lived in a city has dealt with different beliefs. That doesn't make everyone an atheist. Yeah, absolutely. It's like, this is a little bit over the top. What's going on with my stream deck? Alright. Hold on one sec. Things decide they were going to break on me, but okay, whatever. Seems like some things are okay, some things aren't. Okay, whatever effect I have on the undergraduates to whom I teach introductory ethics, I doubt that many of them are turned from morality to self-interest or mere convenience, nor is my influence compelling enough to destroy whatever conscience they have. Yeah, like that's the thing. Like really? Like what's the, how much change do you actually think you're affecting in people by teaching them a few moral theories? It's a little excessive. As I said, the comfort here is cold. More reassuring perhaps is that the existence of profound disagreement about morality is not the fault of moral theorists. It is evident to anyone who reads the newspaper or has an elementary knowledge of history. If moral disagreement makes an epistemic problem, we might reply, it does so anyway, and moral theorists cannot be blamed. It is in any case unclear just what the problem is meant to be. Bayer's remorse may attach to nothing more than a psychological fact that confrontation with disagreement withers confidence. This fact may not obtain, but even if it does, how would it show that loss of confidence is, in Bayer's words, not only usual but sensible? Why is she so willing to concede that students are justified in becoming moral skeptics on the basis of their education? Finally, despite some suggestive remarks, Bayer operates with an insufficiently examined notion of moral theory. What exactly is that moral philosophers are doing that they should not? What should a properly anti-theoretical moral philosophy be? We have then three questions to ask. What is meant by moral theory in this context? Why suppose that it generates an epistemic problem of disagreement that is distinct from or worse than the problem we would otherwise face? And is there any way to avoid moral theory without sheer anti-intellectualism? I mean, looking back on my own history, I didn't really think there was any good answers to anything. So the idea that I learned moral theories I thought were idiotic did not help me in any way, shape, or form change my opinion. It only made me think that the theories were dumb and needed to be changed. And so it completely, if anything, it made me think that it didn't have any effect, and if anything, it made me more certain that whatever good people were doing was good, and that the theories weren't getting there. It definitely did not degrade my viewpoint on what I thought was right or wrong. If anything, it just made me think that philosophers were dumb. Okay, in what follows, the author says, I argue that there is a tempting and prevalent conception of moral theory and its method that generates exactly the problem that Bayer fears. It threatens to corrupt youth in that its epistemology deprives them of resources needed to resist the epistemic challenge of moral disagreement, which its practice at the time makes vivid. I prosecute this charge in three stages. In Section 1, an account of moral theory as it figures in the indictment. In Section 2, the problem of disagreement for moral theorists. And in Section 3, a solution to this problem that moral theorists cannot give. Yeah. Why is this being stupid? I think it's being dumb over here. Okay. What is moral theory? Bayer is not the only recent philosopher to set herself against moral theory. Despite attempts to find unity, however, the work classified as anti-theoretical is exceptionally diverse, and its targets rarely well defined. What common cause joins the sovereignty of good, ethics, and the limit of philosophy, and after virtue? I actually did read. I read After Virtue at some point. This was a book we read as an undergrad. There are dangers in trying to define moral theory against the backdrop of such diversity. For instance, that we will end up with something too ambitious, a characterization that would-be moral theorists can simply disavow. If a moral theory is a procedure for deciding moral questions without the need for judgment or moral sensitivity, there may be no such thing. But whoever thought otherwise? What we need is an account of moral theory that is sufficiently determinate to be the object of critical attention, but one whose aspirations do not seem quixotic. It is inevitable that the critique of moral theory, once defined, will not apply to everything that self-styled moral theorists do. The most we can hope is that it will apply to an enterprise that is both recognizable and influential. Seriously, that's just going to be recognizable. That's all we're going for here. The most we can hope is that moral theory will apply to an enterprise that is both recognizable and influential. Okay, I mean, that's really minimal. So this is so minimal as actually to be just circular. Let's just say moral theory will be a moral theory. I don't know else what this means here. We're just gonna, whatever moral theory we have, we're gonna agree that it is a moral theory. But that's not saying anything. Okay. The target of the present essay, in brief, is the kind of theory that takes our moral intuitions seriously as starting points and aims to produce a systematic body of principles that vindicate these intuitions by endorsing them, undermines them by failing to do so, and yields justified claims where they are silent. Okay, so right here, we're going to vindicate it'll take our moral intuitions seriously as starting points. I have no idea if that's a good idea. Why should we take our moral intuitions seriously as starting points? Like, sometimes our intuitions are terrible. Sometimes we are bad people, and taking our intuitions as like starting points is a bad idea. And so, what else do we have? I don't know. But like, is there starting points? I don't know. Is it a good idea to start your moral theory with your intuitions? I really don't know. And the idea that like it's going to vindicate these intuitions seems terribly like we're going to be just, arguing for what we think is right because we think it's right. And that's not a particularly like I said, some people are terrible, and so arguing that what they think is right is a terrible idea. But okay. So we'll see though. But like, this already worries me. Now, we have to take what we think is right seriously, but is that a good starting point? That's my question here. The real issue is like, why should we believe what we think? Like, seriously, why? Like, why is that good? Aristotle says, yeah, for sure, it's a version of the criterion problem. The epistemic particularist starts with a particular data and then makes a theory, whereas the epistemic methodist starts with a theory or method, then keeps the data that conform, and you just have to choose. Yeah, I think that's well said. But here's the question: like, what are we up to here in this, and like, why are we doing it this way? All right, author says, this description needs refinement, but it should be more or less familiar. Is meant to characterize the work of act consequentialists like Shelley Kagan, rule consequentialists like Brad Hooker, non-consequentialists like Sam Scheffler, and virtue theorists like Michael Sloat. While there are variations within the family of moral theorists, as for instance in their conception of moral intuitions and the nature and degree of deference owed to them, matters to be examined shortly, they share an epistemic commitment to theoretical virtues of simplicity, power, consistency, and explanatory depth. Okay, so now we're actually getting somewhere. These are epistemic commitments. These are not moral intuitions. So this is something else to think about. But like, these are general things that have nothing to do with morals. But like, this is this is like theory selection stuff here. Like, these are ideas like any theory. Like, if you're doing a thing of you're trying to choose which logic you think is best, you could also look for simplicity, power, consistency, and explanatory depth. It has nothing to do with any particular area in philosophy. All right, continuing. The aspiration of moral thought for moral theorists is the construction of a relatively simple, consistent body of moral principles on the basis of which we can justify a wide range of verdicts about particular cases. Justify may but need not mean deduce. It is a matter of explaining why certain verdicts or subsidiary principles are correct, and an answer to the question why does not always take the form of a valid proof. Explanatory depth in moral theory is measured by the extent to which it provides such justifications. Even though principles that justify are no different in kind from the principles and verdicts justified, in that they are further moral claims, and even though justifications must come to an end, the point at which they do so can be more or less superficial. It counts in favor of a moral theory, other things being equal, that its purported justifications are, deep. Well, this is the point. Like, if you think something is giving a good explanation, like, that may mean that you like that theory for whatever reason. But that's fair. Like I was saying earlier, like, the idea that explanatory depth is something we like in our theories, that's good, because you feel like when something is explanatory depth, it's not just explaining the one thing. That would be superficial, like an ad hoc reason. But like, you think you can explain a whole class of human existence and why it's good or bad when it comes to moral theory here. Okay, in what follows, I use the term coherence as a shorthand for theoretical virtues described above, passing over differences in the weight assigned to each of them by different moral theorists. In the limiting case, a theorist might give very minimal weight to simplicity or power, accepting complex explanations without attempting to extend them into novel ground. Still, even theorists of this kind try to avoid gratuitous complexity. More commonly, appeals to simplicity and power are allowed to put pressure on our intuitive beliefs. That's what it is. One sec. Okay. Thank you. Sorry. Got silly things going on here. Okay. We could illustrate this phenomenon with various examples, of which I give three. The first is both simple and familiar. Even critics of act utilitarianism often concede that its elegance and scope are attractive, that they are reasons to accept it if, on balance, the cost of moral intuition is too high. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. The idea that you can just add up the total good of some acts is a incredibly seductive, simple thought. I can say it in a sense. Just figure out all the good that's happening and do the things that makes more of that. Like, that's all we're doing. Like, what acts make more good? Like, the best consequences. The idea that you can explain this to even like a moron and they will understand what you're talking about is incredibly simplistic. Well, no, not simplistic. It's just incredibly seductive for being so easy to appeal to. Oh, come on. You gotta work here, would you? Turn this off. Turn it back on. Why are we not turning on today? The internet is failing for my stream deck, so I don't understand. Good. No, don't do that. Alright. If it fails, it fails. That's the nature of streaming. The second example is more complicated. Debates about the alleged paradoxical character of agent-centered restrictions, roughly moral principles that forbid us from acting in certain ways even to prevent more actions of the very same kind, rest on the apparent difficulty of assimilating these restrictions to a coherent system of principles. What is the rationale for prohibiting action of a certain kind, if not to minimize its occurrence, which agent-centered restrictions perversely rule out? Disputes about this question, even those which stress the force of moral intuition, typically give way to considerations of explanatory power. Yeah, so so I guess this is the question of like being overbearing. Like you're prohibiting action of a certain kind, even if not to minimize its occurrence. Like you're saying something's bad, but it's not even doing anything. But I guess the point is that it gives you an understanding of like the moral world. And I mean, and people like that. Like you get, even if like you're not stopping anything, you understand that certain actions are better than others, and that gives you a fuller picture of the universe, like the moral universe, or like how your world is. Okay, that makes some sense. Finally, a less familiar example. In proposing an account of right action as action motivated by moral virtue, Michael Sloat argues on grounds of simplicity or theoretical unification that benevolence is the only virtue there is. His argument is meant to provide defensible support for the reduction of other putative virtues like justice or courage to good or virtuous motivation involving benevolence or caring. If this seems odd to you, as it does to me, you should ask how it differs from claims about the appeal of act utilitarianism that many are given to accept. Yeah, I mean, this is the whole point. If you can say, look, you look at how people are benevolent or caring versus how all the good in the world actually adds up. Stupid thing here. Although moral theorists agree that coherence is epistemically significant in moral thought and in the method of building our moral intuitions into an adequate theory, they disagree about what moral intuitions are and why we should defer to them. Broadly speaking, there are two views about this. The first treats moral intuitions as nothing more than our initial moral beliefs and advocates an epistemology of pure coherence. One's moral convictions are justified insofar as they belong to a system of beliefs that is simple, powerful, consistent, and explanatorily deep. The answer to the question, why defer to moral intuitions, is that coherence is the only epistemic pressure we face. Only a failure of coherence can require us to reject our initial moral beliefs, and what we should believe is a function of them. Alright, so why would anyone think this is a good idea? That seriously, why would anyone think that we have initial coherence? Like, seriously, do you actually think you're coherent, like, right now? The fact that you don't run into contradictions every day does not mean that you're coherent. That means, like, most of the time you're just, like, plodding along. But you're only been plodding along because you've worked out through other problems in the past. Yeah, exactly, Anferl. No one actually thought this. And so the idea that, like, oh, yeah, you're fine the way you are, it's like, not if you're talking about coherence. Like, everything does not work together all the time. Like, what kind of experience have you had in your life that you think that you are universally coherent? So it's like, why defer to that? Is that coherence is the only epistemic pressure we face? No, that means if you like, say you've had a sheltered life. Like, Anfel says, like Tyler the Creator says, I'm a motherfucking paradox. No, I'm not. Threesomes with a fucking triceratops. That's exactly. Aristotle says, this is a deeply rationalistic intellectualist take on intuitions. Yeah, like, this is a little bit crazy to me. Like, the idea that, like, I was just gonna say, if you are a sheltered, rich, like, person living in a bubble that doesn't ever have, so you're the Buddha. That's who you are. You are a prince of the realm. Everything you ever want is there. You have no epistemic pressure. Basically, the Buddha was a moral god. Well, not god. Well, maybe god. I don't know exactly how you define that. But that Buddha was a moral genius. And, like, anyone else other than the Buddha would never have run into a coherence problem in their world, because they already had everything and it was beautiful and perfect all the time. And so that's the thing. It's like, so this is a very, as Aristotle points out, intellectualist, the idea that we're going to run into a coherence problem. No, that's a matter of chance. And so that is not, like, this is not a good way of judging things. And Fennell says people can be amoral or immoral but act as socially acceptable. People do that all the time because it's functional. Yeah. And you'll hear people say, like, look, like, I know Shane says this. He says, like, I am a product of society. I do things because it's socially acceptable to do so. If that was not there, I might act differently. So, like, you'll hear Shane say that on stream. It's like, well, Shane is self-aware that, like, the reason he's doing stuff, but, like, that is not a coherence thing. Like, it's if anything, it's incoherent. He's acting outside of his intuitions, which that's fine. But, like, that's the question. Like, what actually is this epistemic pressure you face to make your intuitions work together? And as Aristotle points out, like, that's lol, such a sociological thing to say. Yeah, it is. But, like, as Aristotle points out, it's rationalistic. It's overly rationalistic, idealistic sort of thing to start off with. All right, and this is fair. This is just, like, the first pass at it from the author. But, I mean, this is now I'm starting to get a flavor for this writer. Seems like a sort of a very rationalistic sort of writer here. So Aristotle says, but maybe Setiya's point is that only proper moral systems pass the coherence check. Perhaps, but, like, this paragraph here is more justifying the method of building our moral intuitions into an adequate theory. So the question is, why would so you say, as in descriptively certain people can be incoherent, but that's what makes them different from philosophers. Yeah, so maybe the point here is that, like, if you want to have a theory that is philosophically acceptable, then you're going to have to pass the coherence check. But the problem is, he's starting, I don't know, Kieran here, they, like, what their pronouns are. The problem is, we're talking about, why are you starting with moral intuitions? Why are they assuming that moral intuitions that we have are going to be coherent? So this is part of the thing, is, like, where did they start? We're starting with moral intuitions, not with the overarching theory choice. And I agree on the overarching theory choice. Like, if we're just talking theory choice, then yeah, like, most philosophers will not accept an incoherent theory. Okay, well, let's just see where Setiya is going with this. The second view is more ambitious about the analogy between moral thinking and empirical knowledge. It treats moral intuitions as a matter of how things seem, morally speaking, where such seemings are cognitive states distinct from beliefs, and gives them the epistemic role of perceptual appearances. Thomas Nagel defends this idea in The View from Nowhere. In physics, one infers from factual appearances to their most plausible explanation in a theory of how the world is. In ethics, one infers appearances of value to their most plausible explanation in a theory of what there is reason to do or want. If we start by regarding the appearances of value as appearances of something, and then step back to form hypotheses about the broader system of motivational possibilities of which we have had a glimpse, the result is a gradual opening out of a complex domain which we apparently discover. The method of discovery is to seek the best normative explanation of the normative appearances. Alright, so we're discovering how we think the moral world is based on some sort of intuition here then? It's not that we're just using our intuitions, it's that we're looking at the world and saying, this is how the world is with these normative things. This is strange too. Let's finish up this paragraph fast. Alright, author says, on what I will call the empirical model, one's moral intuitions constitute evidence for one's moral beliefs in much of the way that perceptual appearances constitute evidence for beliefs about the physical world, and the standards of coherence figure in determining what this evidence supports. Again, there will be variations here. How far can the exegesis of coherence require us to reject the appearances? How are the elements of coherence to be balanced together? For the moment, however, we need not say more. Moral theory can be defined roughly and disjunctively as endorsing either pure coherence in moral epistemology or the empirical model. Either way, we need theory in ethics and theoretical virtues like simplicity and unifying power to have some weight in deciding what kind of ethical view to adopt. Aristotle says, this is the weird non-naturalist moral realism stuff. Morality and specifically reason can find the capital R reasons that moral agents have. Yeah, and like I was going to make a similar point, is that you're still basing everything off one's moral intuitions because they constitute the evidence for one's moral beliefs. So instead of just starting with the intuitions and building from there, you're looking at them as the raw materials from which to, make theories about. So it's not just rationalistic, it's sort of empirical. But again, you're starting from the exact same stuff. And like, again, taking the moral intuitions as primary, maybe that's a good idea, but that was not justified in this. It's, again, either you're just building directly off of them or you're making your hypothesizing about them. Either way, that's what you're taking as the raw material for your theory and saying, well, either way, it's fine. It's like, I ain't so sure that's the right way to do it. And it seems like, of course, this author knows what they're doing in some sense, but like, there is something to say, look, like, yeah, I don't know, they were somewhat saying like that this does work with virtue ethics, and I know Aristotle in chat is a virtue ethicist. The question is, isn't it like a cornerstone of like Aristotelian virtue ethics that you have to be taught this shit? Like, it is built up through habit, and only through habit do you gain virtue. This isn't something that comes from moral intuitions. This is something you have to work at. Your moral intuitions are bad and have to be developed over time. Like, this seems immediately opposed by virtue ethics. So this is like a serious problem for, like, this paper may be fine in terms of like consequentialists and deontologists, where you are looking at, okay, how do you, how you add up what are all the good acts. Then that may take your understanding of what good is through your intuitions and use that as like the thing that helps you judge what is constitutes the good. And same, what is should everyone be like in terms of the categorical imperative in deontology. How should everyone act? Well, that may be a moral intuition, how you decide what should be universalized. That's not the way it is in virtue ethics. So this paper may apply, but not to virtue ethics. Anne's pushing back how you get all the moralistic rules about women. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's 100% right. But the problem, it's like, yeah, it's that the point is that you have to have more than one way of doing this, because what's going to happen is if you are like in a society that's misogynistic, it's going to be taught that way, and then that's how people are going to think about it. But that's the thing. You can't look at people's intuitions, because in that society and the people who have power, it's still not going to work. Actually, I'm sorry if I got that wrong, though, because you were quoting something Aristotle put beforehand. All right, Aris says, additionally, universalist proposition like you shouldn't kill innocent people has to be indexed to specific agents, their embodiment and social situation, and the scope of their life. Oh, interesting. Yeah, you'd have to be more specific about that. You can say abstract stuff as a heuristic is not very action guiding. Yeah, that's true too. So again, you still need to rely on intuitions for a lot of this. Yeah, it makes it very hard. Tradition doesn't necessarily follow logic, just as Catholics. Yeah. So it's just weird though. Like the fact that the author here is just so in this relying on intuition camp. And let me just be clear about it. I never like intuition talk. I find it very opaque because in my experience, I tend to have different intuitions about a lot of stuff. Maybe not moral, but in philosophy, I've had a lot of things that like everyone would say one thing, I'd be like, I don't think that's at all how it is, and I'd be the only person in the room like that. And so I've always had a very big problem with people like, oh, well, this is just like clearly what it is. I'm like, not for me. Maybe for you, but like intuition never meant anything for me because I had to justify my position. Everyone else was just like, well, that's how it is. I'm like, well, that doesn't work. So. Anywho, so this is just that's my bias. I don't like intuition talk. All right, 2. How moral theory corrupts youth. Well, maybe we can say, consequentialists and deontologists, they are corrupting the youth. Moral theory can seem innocent to the point of inevitability. Against this, I will argue that moral theorists cannot give an adequate epistemology of disagreement. The reason for this are several, but they have a common source: a failure to find sufficient asymmetry in the situations of those who disagree. Aristotle says the people he's citing are 20th, 21st century. Yeah, they're contemporary metaphysicians. The upside of that is accepted by the big academics. The downside is that it's pretty limited thinking and a peculiar way of talking about this. Yeah, so this is directed at contemporary philosophers. And so in some sense, even though contemporary philosophers are not dumb, it is a limited viewpoint. It's sort of like in the now, how are these people talking about stuff? So, yeah, see, the problem was the adequate epistemology of disagreement. I mean, is this a surprise to anyone in chat here? If I have an intuition and you have an intuition and they don't agree, what else do we have to say about it? There's nothing else to be said. It's not an adequate epistemology. Like, it's just like, oh, we disagree. Okay. It's like, all right. It's like, well, I could have told you that from the get-go because you set up your discussion in this way. That's how this is, like, that's just what it is. If you're starting from intuitions, which are opaque things, where you can't get beyond them, then you can't have disagreement because you're just going to have, like, it's apples to oranges. You can't compare the things. Okay, in this section, I press the problem of disagreement against the two kinds of moral theory in turn. Yeah, it's, like, shocking. Okay. This undertaking rests on assumptions about the interpretation and metaphysics of moral judgment, but they are relatively modest, that we can speak of moral propositions as being true or false, that moral beliefs can be epistemically justified or not, and that in cases of apparent disagreement about morality, even between members of quite different communities, at least one party must be mistaken, though not perhaps irrational, in her beliefs. Though disputable, these assumptions are shared by the moral theorists I am arguing against. That's fair. Like, this is in this sort of discussion, as Aristotle was saying, is in the contemporary philosophy camp. So, like, you have to be able to hash things out. And that's all that said. We can hash it out. Begin with the empirical model. In the background is an abstract epistemic picture according to which one's degrees of belief should be proportioned to one's evidence, and one's evidence is identified with a set of propositions or mental states to which one bears some special relation. The indeterminacies of this picture could be resolved in various ways. As it stands, it does not say that one should be confident of P only if one has evidence of its truth. There is room for non-evidential justified beliefs. Nor does it entail objective Bayesianism, according to which one's degrees of belief should match permissible prior probabilities conditionalized on evidence propositions. It assumes very little about the nature of evidence and evidential support. What the empirical model adds to this abstract picture is that, for moral beliefs, one's evidence is ultimately supplied by moral intuitions, intellectual seemings that play the epistemic role of perceptual appearances, and that the proportions that one's degree of belief should bear to these appearances are fixed by permissible standards of coherence and of deference to how things seem. All right, that was a terribly long thing to say, hey, guess what? Your intuitions tell you how things are to you. Like, that's it. That's what happened. Aristotle says, yep, all those universalists run into the same problems. Rawls hoped that we would all eventually converge once we talked things through. I hold no such hope and try to keep my stick sharpening skills current. Yeah, I'd be incredibly disappointed if everything just seemed to work out with contemporary philosophy. I think there are massive problems, and the idea that we're all just going to hash things out at the moment is, like, I think massively, massively, massively idealistic, and to the point of being naive, actually. That everyone always thinks that they're at the end of history, that we're just a little bit more stuff and like just a few more good ideas, and then we'll have everything sort of worked out. This is every period in history. I wish Shane was here because I have never asked anyone this, but I completely think this is true. At every fucking moment in history, you're always at the cutting edge of what people know. Always. Well, actually, a few times in history, people have like lost knowledge of the past. But for the most part, you're always at the cutting edge of history, and no one has it. The idea that we're at the end of history now is like just stupid. That'd be an amazing blog piece. I should write that up. That'll go on the stack of all the other things I have to do, Aris. Yeah. I feel like a 3 Quarks Daily would eat that up. Yeah. Frankly, Shane would need to write it. I need someone that knows all the history. I'm just angry that like everyone in every moment of history always thinks they know that, oh yeah, we're just about there. It's like, yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, the importance of me writing a blog piece at the moment is kind of low on the list. So this is going to be on the low end of things I want to get done. So, but I can rant and rave on my Twitch stream. So I got that at least. Continuing, there is a complication here that some moral beliefs and perhaps some moral intuitions rest on non-moral beliefs, as when I think you acted wrongly, partly on the ground that you killed my friend. If the latter belief is unjustified, that will tend to undermine the former. Still, on the empirical model, this is the only way in which non-moral evidence is relevant to moral epistemology. If our non-moral beliefs are similar and similarly justified, they can simply be ignored. Holding these points fixed, one's degrees of moral belief should be those best proportions to one's moral intuitions. Yeah, okay, so you subtract out your biases, and then you're just left with your perfect, coherent, moral intuitions. This also is giving me a very Western flavor of philosophy, like lacking original sin, like just sort of like the perfection of one soul to begin with, that you somehow just start off this way. I don't hold this sort of thing. But like I'm really getting this. Like you start off with like some perfect moral beliefs as if you don't have original sin as like a child or something. So, but like this is just one of the things that's going on in my head when I'm reading this is like, seriously, you think people are just like, you have like coherent, perfect beliefs that you can like rely upon if you just subtract out all the biases? Okay. The problem for the empirical model can be seen by reflecting on recent work in the epistemology of disagreement. This work is sharply divided about the extent to which one should defer to epistemic peers whose beliefs or degrees of belief are different from one's own. In particular, there are serious objections to the so-called equal weight view, on which one should give the same weight to others' opinions unless one has more independent evidence of one's own reliability. I'm fucking happy that people have started coming down on this. The equal weight view is something I completely hate. I remember when this got brought up maybe 15 years ago or something, maybe less. I'm with you. All right. I'd have to look it up in the notes later. The equal weight view says if smart people are disagreeing with you, you should, give their opinions equal weight to your own. Fuck no. Fuck those people that think this too. Like, it is a terrible thing. I have worked tooth and nail for some of my beliefs, and the idea that some asshole is going to come and be like, no, I'm smart, you should give my view equal weight. Fucking hell no. Not just no. Fuck that person and fuck you if you think so. That drives me insane that the hard fart knowledge I have worked my entire life for is going to give someone else, some jackass, equal weight because they think they're smart and I think they, who the fuck are they that I know them? No. Just no. This drives me crazy. And so I remember someone arguing this before, and I just like went off on them, and they were like, "Holy fuck!" And I was like, "Yeah, go fuck." I was like, "Go, just get away from me." And I felt bad. Like I don't think the person's a bad I don't know if they're a good philosopher. I don't think they're a bad person. They probably are an okay philosopher, but like I basically called them like names at that point. I was just like, Jesus fucking Christ. And I think I said some stupid things on top of it. I was angry. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I gotta calm myself down. Hold on one second. Do not be coming at me with the equal weight view. Do not. Alright, still, even those who reject such deference as a general policy concede that it is the best response to cases of perceptual disagreement. Go fuck yourself. Like, just no. What the fuck? Perceptual disagreement? Like, you can see something, I can see something. Okay, maybe? Like, if my eyes aren't as good and you can see it, like, okay. To take an example from Tom Kelly, imagine that you and I are watching two horses cross a finish line. It looks to me as though horse A finished ahead of horse B, but it looks the opposite way to you. Before we talk, I am justified in believing that horse A won, and you are justified in believing the same about horse B. But if we compare notes and we come to know how things seem to our interlocutor, our confidence should fade. Okay, this is like fine. If you are in a context where you really have no knowledge, this is not a knowledge thing. This is something that happened in a split second. Yeah, then in that case, if you have something that you don't actually know, then sure, you can defer to someone else. But like, you can see how different the example is, where you like something happened in a millisecond, you think that horse won, versus where someone else did that may have had a better angle than you. But that's not knowledge. That's like, a millisecond of time. Yeah. That's a really good point there, Infernal. Some things are not up to perception, like bloody racism. And so, like, this is the argument that the author is using here is an extremely limited example. And it shouldn't probably be used to make a bigger point than other than just this very minute point. Because when it comes to moral stuff, like Anne is saying, it ain't gonna work. Okay. Vipers, we are talking about, Does Moral Theory Corrupt the Youth? The Youth by Kieran Setiya. Basically, if like we teach people moral theories and we confuse them because all of our theories are complicated and can like justify different things, should that make people not like moral theories and do whatever the fuck they want? And basically, yeah. And so they're going through different ways. The issue here is that this author is basing a lot of stuff on intuitions. And so your moral intuitions are basically your best evidence for what is right and wrong. And that's how we should, in using various theories, decide what is right. Either you take your intuitions and you make a moral theory out of that, or you take your intuitions and then you come up with hypotheses of ways your intuitions should be applied in the world. And they're saying, that's basically what's going on. We've been ragging on them because why should our intuitions be good evidence for how the world is morally? I don't hold that at all, that people just have some sort of good moral intuitions to be based off of. But yeah. Yeah, so whatever. So they're saying, look, if people disagree with you, this is called the equal weight view, which I hate. Yeah, and you're probably right about that, Vipers, that if you're right and everyone else is wrong, we agree with that. But here's what they're saying, and I hate this. It's called the equal weight view, that if some other smart person disagrees with you, you should give their opinion equal weight to your own, which I think is stupid. Just frankly stupid, and all the philosophers that say that are stupid. Alright. So, yeah. Alright, so we're talking about like if a horse race, and you think horse A won and someone else thinks horse B won. If you both don't have very good views of it, you can say, hey, we don't know. This verdict does not depend on the equal weight view and its attendant controversies, but on the way in which our evidence has changed. I have gained evidence that suggests that horse B won the race, while you have gained evidence that horse A won the race. Moreover, given the relevant background assumptions and symmetries, it is natural to think that the total evidence that we now share favors neither the proposition that horse A finished ahead of horse B, nor the proposition that horse B finished ahead of horse A. I have no independent reason to discount your perceptions or to think that they are less reliable. I should give how things look to you as much evidential weight as how things look to me. This is consistent with my holding my line if I have evidence that horse A won the race or that horse B lost apart from how things look. But as it happens, that is not the case. Abstracting from asymmetries of self-knowledge, it may be easier for me to know how things look to me than how they look to you. My total evidence requires me to suspend belief. This is terrible. Like, I just think this is terrible because you have no idea how the other person has come up with their knowledge, what they claim to be knowledge. They may just be expressing opinion. Very certainly, I know exactly what I had to do to fight for my knowledge and know what I know. And so the idea that I'm going to give someone else that credit, that they put the same amount of time and effort in that I did, not happening. It's just not happening. Like, if they can back up their position at a certain point, then I will listen to them. The idea that they claiming to be smart and they know things, that is not evidence. Not at all. Okay. How does this bear on the empirical model in moral epistemology? It shows that the model is subject to a skeptical problem of disagreement. We can see this in two stages. First, not all significant moral conflict can be traced to differences in non-moral beliefs, or in perhaps implicit standards of coherence and deference to moral intuition. Yeah, I mean, not everything is going to be just a bias. That's fine. It is not that things seem the same way to all of us, morally speaking, and that we merely differ in the beliefs we derive from the appearances, as different scientists might draw different conclusions from the same observational evidence. Instead, our moral intuitions vary widely, so that serious moral disagreement does and would survive agreement on the non-moral facts and in how proportion to moral beliefs to the evidence that intuition provides. Even if we were perfectly coherent by the lights of the empirical model, with systems of moral belief that are simple, powerful, consistent, and explanatorily deep, ideally proportioned to our different moral intuitions, we would continue to disagree. Yeah, this is the whole point we were talking about earlier. You can, if you have different intuitions, you can just disagree because the intuitions are opaque. They're just at the bottom of your reasoning, and if they don't line up with someone else's, there's nothing else that can be said. You will just continue to disagree. Okay. Second, if moral intuitions play the epistemic role of perceptual appearances and provide us with evidence in a similar way, the horse race argument applies. Before they discover their disagreement in moral outlook, those whose intuitions differ widely may well have justified moral beliefs, but when they confront one another and come to know that things seem different to others, their confidence should fade. With no more evidence of their own reliability apart from the intuitions in dispute, they should incorporate their interlocutors' intuitions into their total evidence. The likely effect is that, abstracting from asymmetries of self-knowledge, their evidence will no longer support their previous views. Again, that's the whole thing. They're opaque things, and you're basically saying, hey, you see it this way, I see it that way. Who knows what's going on? This is like weak-minded stuff, in my opinion. It's like, why would I agree with other people? If I know in the very limited case, like a horse race that I don't really know because it's such a split-second thing, yeah, that's fine. When it comes to other stuff, no. Just no. And it's like Ann said, if you're talking about like racism, like, no, that doesn't matter if it's just like how you see the world. How you see the world may be crap. Then you can't just claim that's how you see the world and that makes it good. That makes you a shitty person sometimes. If you see the world and you're like, oh, those people are terrible and that's how I see it. No, that makes you a shit person because you can't see the value in like other people's lives. Simple. Okay. The foregoing remarks are inevitably schematic. On the empirical model, what I should believe in the face of moral disagreement turns on the extent to which others have conflicting moral intuitions, and how far disagreements can be explained by differences in non-moral belief and in failure to conform to ideal standards of coherence and deference to intuition. These are epistemic and sociological questions of enormous complexity. It is speculative to claim, as I do, that things seem sufficiently different to others, past and present, as to undermine our moral confidence if we give those appearances the same weight as our own. But the objection to the empirical model does not, in the end, require this. Consider instead a hypothetical disagreement. You belong to an utterly homogeneous moral community whose moral intuitions are those you actually have, and whose moral beliefs are proportioned to them by permissible standards of coherence and deference. Your non-moral beliefs are also well supported by non-moral evidence. For the first time, you meet someone from another community. He agrees with you about the non-moral facts, but his moral intuitions are shocking. Fill in the details accordingly. Perhaps it seems to him that children are property and can be sold or given away, that women have no moral standing whatsoever, or that one should always act so as to maximize aggregate happiness even if many are trampled along the way. For more dramatic possibilities, we can turn from morality to practical reason. Perhaps it seems to him that what you call justice is a farce, and that one should be exclusively selfish, or act so as to satisfy one's final desires, whatever they are. Despite this, his ethical beliefs are as well proportioned to his intuitions as your beliefs are to yours. It turns out that he, too, belongs to a homogeneous community as extensive as your own. What should you believe now? On the empirical model, you must become agnostic about the questions on which you disagree, since apart from the intuitions that conflict, you have no more evidence of your reliability than his. But this is not the right response. We should not defer to moral monsters, but condemn them, however coherent and numerous they are. The empirical model assigns the wrong weight to moral intuitions in giving them epistemic role of perceptual appearances. Okay, I agree with that. If you're just saying, look, they're just like how things look to me, that's what's moral, that's wrong. Sure. These arguments against the empirical model, that it threatens skepticism in the face of actual disagreement, and that it gives the wrong verdict in cases of hypothetical disagreement, prompt a natural response. They take the analogy between moral intuitions and perceptual appearances seriously and ask what we should believe in perceptual disagreements of the relevant kind. The results are then applied to moral disagreements conceived on the empirical model. Advocates of this model may protest that they did not intend the analogy so literally. Apart from a limited role for the non-moral evidence, their claim is that one's moral beliefs should be proportioned to the evidence supplied by one's moral intuition, where the proportions are fixed by permissible standards of coherence and deference. Nothing follows about the epistemic significance of others' intuitions, even if one has no evidence apart from one's own intuitions about their relative reliability. If we refuse to give weight or equal weight to the intuitions of others, we can block the consequences lamented above. Yeah, this is the thing. If you don't have to give people like the equal weight hypothesis, you just ignore that, then you don't have to give like monsters like you don't have to believe anything like a moral monster says. But that doesn't justify you either. Yeah, so okay. The author is going to get to it, because that could mean you are also a moral monster. You wouldn't know it because you have no way of comparing anymore. Okay. If we take this path, however, we not only compromise the analogy between moral intuitions and perceptual appearances on which the empirical model drew, but fall into the trap of epistemic egoism. Yeah. So you're going to say, like, I'm the best. In order to resist the problem of disagreement and the corresponding threat of skepticism, the revised empirical model must say that when my intuitions conflict dramatically with yours, I am justified in sustaining most of the beliefs that rest on them, even if, apart from that conflict, I have no more evidence of my reliability than yours. Yeah, this is just, you're going to be a dogmatist. You're going to say, I'm doing what I think is right because I think it's the right way to go. You're just going dogmatic at this point. Since the situation is symmetric, you are equally entitled to your beliefs in the corresponding predicament. But now we can invoke a qualified reflection principle for epistemic justification. To a first approximation, if A knows that he would be justified in believing P in circumstance Q, then he is already justified in being conditionally confident of P given Q. This cannot be exactly right. We need to allow for the case in which A also knows or has reason to suspect that his evidence Q would be misleading, so that he would be justified in believing P, even though it might very well be false. Roughly speaking, to say that A's evidence would be misleading is to say that if he were in Q, the situation Q, there would be some fact about his situation, knowledge of which he would defeat or undermine his justification for believing P. No doubt further refinement is necessary, but we can work with this second approximation. Yeah. So, okay, fine. You just don't know what situation you're in, so you don't even know how you can judge your own intuitions. But we knew that was a problem because you can't judge your own intuitions. That's because they're your intuitions. Okay, so, quote, if S knows that he would be justified in believing P in circumstance Q, then he is already justified in being conditionally confident of P given Q, so long as he has no reason to think that his evidence of Q would be misleading. And this is just saying in this author's talk that basically if you think something because it's your intuition and you have no reason to think you're being misled, then you can just believe it because your intuitions are okay in this sort of idealistic world we're in here. All right. Author says, in order to avoid complications about evidential defeat and undermining, we will ask what I would be justified in believing apart from the evidence given by my actual intuitions. On the revised empirical model, they might threaten to defeat or undermine the justifications applied by other intuitions I might have had. Okay, whatever. To make this question vivid, imagine that I am reflecting on morality before I have moral intuitions like some prodigious 2-year-old epistemologist. This need not be possible, of course. The point is that we are interested in antecedent justification. Suppose then that I know the truth of the revised empirical model and that my knowledge does not rest on moral intuitions. In particular, I know that I will be justified in believing the moral outlook my intuitions support, whatever it is, even if things seem very different to you and I have, apart from this conflict, no more evidence of my reliability than yours. It follows by the reflection principle that I am already justified in being conditionally confident of any moral outlook that my intuitions support, even if yours do not. In other words, quite apart from the evidence given by my actual intuitions, I am justified in believing that the moral outlook my intuitions support is more likely to be correct than the moral outlook supported by yours, that they are a more reliable guide to the moral facts. And since the situation is symmetric, you are justified in believing the same about yours. I mean, this is just the whole thing we were saying earlier about, look, if I'm relying on my intuitions and you're relying on yours, and those are the rock bottom way we're arguing, you can't make a distinction between them. And so there is no objective thing here. And this is what the author has gotten to. Took a lot of words to say that, though. This consequence is intolerable. Perhaps it is true that we are a priori justified in trusting the reliability of our perceptual and intellectual faculties, but not that, apart from the evidence they supply, we are justified in believing that our faculties are more reliable than others, should their outputs diverge. Such comparative confidence in our own capacities, regardless of what they tell us, amounts to epistemic egoism. In the absence of evidence, we are not entitled to believe that how things seem to us is a better guide to how they are than how they seem to anyone else. And this is just repeating the bullshit of the epistemic equal weight principle that they've already assumed. And that's all that they've said. Viper says, racism is bad because we shouldn't judge people for their innate properties. However, the answer to the nature versus nurture debate seems to be a bit of both. So if it was proven that some people have a genetic predisposition to extreme right wing beliefs, would it then be immoral to hate people for their ideologies because it's potentially an innate trait? Viper says, I know that seems like a hypothetical, but we do know that developmental brain damage, traumatic brain injury, and or intellectual disability also are prevalent among those federally sentenced to death. Yeah, well, look, race is very hard to classify people as. And so the idea that we're classifying people like we do by race, like we've done in the United States, that is a terrible way of classifying people. Now, if you're saying, all right, people with certain genetic dispositions have problems like, socializing. So like people with traumatic brain injury are more likely to, let's just assume that they are more likely to do, bad crimes or something. Then it's like, yeah, can we be like a little displeased with those people in some sense. Well, it's like you have to give people a chance, but they may be more predisposed to certain things, but aren't like. So it's like you treat it like maybe a disability. We have to accommodate those people, and like keep an eye on like people that might be very likely to do something bad, but like you don't immediately treat them like they're terrible people, because they're probably not. Racism is better than astrology. Well, yeah, you don't want to have any just like random like junk science doing it. You need to have some sort of factual like scientific evidence. So you need something. But the way we classify stuff is hard. And so it's like you can't someone's gonna get pissy. But it's like, look, you have to be able to make some if you have the evidence, you have to be able to look at the evidence and say stuff. That doesn't mean like you get to, throw people in jail ahead of time. Like you don't. You have to take, on average, take a look at stuff and see if this is really what's going to happen. We have had a terrible time classifying people in the United States and over the world the whole time. So it's like this has never worked out in the past. And so it's like, can we do this? Maybe. Have we ever done it successfully before? No. And so the idea that like we're going to do this well now is unlikely. And so we have to like come up with something better. Maybe in the future, can you say like, are you going to have like a killer gene and you've got that gene in you and it's going to make you more predisposed to killing people? I mean, we don't have science like that. And the idea that we have science like that is like science fiction. And so it's like predisposed to like extreme views, maybe, but that does not make those people bad. Like, are those views actually bad? We don't know that ahead of time. And so all of this is like, you're not going to get anywhere. That's really, I'm worried it's like, we just have never successfully done any of this. Now, I'm not ruling out that the science can't go that way in the future. It's just we have no success at it now. So that's a feeling. Yes, we do. The whole idea behind the concept of psychopathy up to a level. Well, I meant for when we don't have a like classifying people like based on race. We've not done very good at that. I mean, if we have something like, I don't know psychopathy, so like we can look at certain sorts of people and say like these people are more predisposed to this stuff. But like, yeah. Aristotle says, but lots of psychopaths don't commit crimes, as do lots of people with disabilities, brain trauma, etc. And says there are things about the human brain that, when damaged, produce a lack of empathy and inability to feel most normal emotions. Yeah, see, this is part of the thing. It's like, we do know that certain damage does stuff. So, Viper says, I'm not saying racism is good, I'm just saying that if you're going to classify people and assume traits, astrology is a terrible system, 12 categories is nothing. No, I mean, we don't want to do like complete junk science like astrology, but racism isn't like a whole lot better. Like doing the racial categories, we've not done a whole lot better. So it's like, yeah, what we do have, like for the psychopaths, I guess you're saying, is that we're getting some knowledge about this, and that's fine. Like it's like, then we should go take a look at that stuff. Yeah, so some people do have more violent like tendencies, and you can like see changes in their brain that have corresponded to that, and that's fair. But again, like, it does not guarantee that that's how the people are gonna be. Yeah, no scientific base. Hey Shane, what's up? How you doing, Shane? Let's give a shout out to Shane. So, hey, look, there's Shane in his hat. And hey, I think I can do the. Let's see if I can do the real shout out. Yeah, Shane. So I was gonna say, here's a question for you. Is it the case, Shane, that everyone always thinks they're living at the end of times, where they think that, oh, if we only had like a little bit more knowledge, it would just know all the things? Like, everyone always seems to think that, like, oh, if we just fix one more thing, then we'll have like completed physics, it'll all be good. It's just a question. I think Everyone always thinks this, that we're just about like finished with all knowledge. I like if we just like we've basically got everything solved, and the rest is just details. Is this like a historically common thing? That's one thing I'd like to know. I think it's true. Even if you tell me I'm wrong, I'm going to go on believing it, but I just want your opinion. Shane says apocalyptic thought is pretty common, but so is massively overexpressing how much we know. Yeah, fair enough. Close enough to that, to what I was saying. Yeah, so what we're reading here is we're basically talking about, like, is, like, giving confusing moral theories to people going to make them think that, like, moral theories are crap and therefore you don't have to believe them. Viper says a specific example would be, can we prosecute Phineas Gage for illegal actions after his accident? Don't edit the middle of sentences. Yeah. So, like, you're basically saying he's not the same person that he was because of the brain accident, and then you're saying because he wouldn't have done these criminal acts before his accident and then he did them afterwards, or should we really be prosecuting the piece of steel that went through his head because that's what really made him do it? I don't know. Basically it is one of those things where it's like you put people into a mental institute instead of into jail sometimes. Yeah. Anne says probably not, but it'd be necessary to keep an eye on him to be a danger for society. Shane says the Roman thought that they were literally the apex of knowledge. They pretty much look down on everyone from a pretty high horse. Yeah, but so do Americans, so I mean, nothing special there. So, always a chunky horse. So yeah. But look at the Enlightenment. Yeah, exactly. People have been like this. And says, Arizal says, there are only two plausible options: criminal prosecution to institutionalized treatment. Just because people aren't agents doesn't mean they get a pass. Yeah, that's fair. Just because something changed in Phineas Gage does not mean he gets a free pass. And Fernell says, like the guy who shot a lot of people with a sniper rifle in some university in Texas in the 50s, he had a brain tumor that apparently had a direct influence over his actions. Yeah, like that does happen where all of a sudden you get like a brain tumor or an aneurysm and then you act completely different. And it's like, if it wasn't there, would they have done this action? I don't know, but probably not. And Shane says, and look at the late 1800 physicists who thought they were 2 steps away from creating a unified theory. Well, that's the one that's always in my head. Is like they all thought, like 2 days before like the general relativity and the quantum revolution, that like physics was done. Like they all thought they had a unified theory, and then all of a sudden we had relativity and quantum physics, and everything just blew up the old way of thinking. So yeah, but that's actually the example that I've always had in my head. We got the dream teaming chat. Well, it's like, what is this? We got the nerds as a course. Well, you can be honorary Vipers. Well, you said you might start streaming then, so you can be part of it. Yeah. All right. So let's see. We're about halfway through this paper. Let's keep going. Got to get through this. So the empirical model in moral epistemology thus confronts a dilemma. If it treats moral intuitions like perceptual appearances, it faces a problem of moral disagreement. If it averts this problem by insisting on an asymmetric treatment of our own and others' intuitions along the lines explored above, it leads to epistemic egoism. Conclusion: the empirical model does not allow for a plausible, non-skeptical response to moral disagreement. And this is like we were saying earlier. Yeah, that's funny. Good point, Aris. Why all of a sudden has Vipers gone gone the humility route? Very strange that all of a sudden gone for humility. All right. The moral theorist's alternative is a pure coherence view, which drops the idea of moral intuitions as intellectual seemings. Instead, it begins with our moral beliefs and claims that they are justified to the extent that they form a coherent system, where coherence is a matter of simplicity, power, consistency, and explanatory depth. As with the empirical model, there is a complication when moral beliefs rest on non-moral beliefs that are not supported by non-moral evidence. But again, we can set this aside. Comedy is about subverting expectations. We just read a paper on comedy too, Vipers, before you got here. That was the first paper earlier. We were like, where's Vipers? He wanted to see this. That one was saying that basically comedy is shifting basically identity groups. And so when you make a joke, you are shifting what sort of group you're with. Yeah. You're asking Ara something. He can answer. If our non-moral beliefs are similar and similarly justified, they can be ignored. If one's degrees of moral beliefs should be those achieved by revising one's initial beliefs to the limit of coherence. Shane says, I really wish I would have been here the whole paper. The statement that we can set all of this aside is just ringing all sorts of alarm bells. Well, Shane, this whole paper has been ringing alarm bells the whole time. So you're with us on this. It's been this way the whole thing. So yeah, maybe you'd have a better feel for it, but still, you're not really very far off. This is an alarming paper. Variations are possible for the instance, those that give special weight to a subset of moral beliefs, one's considered judgments. So yeah. Since the beliefs of others do not have the epistemic standing of one's own, they count as evidence only when one has evidence of their reliability. One need not be disturbed by the fact of disagreement as such. Okay, so they're finally saying, look, you know your intuitions. You don't know about other people's, how reliable their intuitions are. You know how reliable your intuitions are. And so you shouldn't immediately trust other people's moral intuitions, all things considered. Quote, in the end, whether one is justified in retaining one's original view in light of another depends on whether one's own evidence tells in favor of the other view or not. In the face of even coherent alternatives, one justifiably rejects the others when one does on the basis of what one justifiably believes. This means, of course, that had one's initial beliefs been different, had one believed one thing rather than another, one would have justifiably rejected the views that one actually, and with justification, accepts. Yeah, so I mean, it's like, look, if you started off differently and then you got some evidence that you should change your mind, then you should. That's all. By the same token, one interlocutor is justified in his beliefs, however different they are from yours, to the extent that they are coherent. The situation is symmetric. Since one's beliefs are justified if coherent, the bare existence of someone with a coherent and therefore justified alternative theory is epistemically harmless. Aristotle says this whole thing only works if you're interacting with strangers or people from a culture you've never known. We do have knowledge about what intuitions do in life. We see people living by different values all the time, and some people really fuck things up. Yeah, this is the idea that the coherence is going to be like everything's going to be coherent is like that's an unrealistic thing, and I think that's what you're pointing out. They're claiming that everything's coherent, and it's just not a realistic position. Shane says this completely ignores situations where the person on the other end has different viewpoints, and Aris just said that, yeah. So this is the issue. They can have different viewpoints, but the idea that they're going to be maximally coherent and like compared to everything you know is kind of unlikely. The fact that you're gonna have two completely two theories that have different results that are completely compatible seems very unlikely. As if you are from similar backgrounds, if you're from even radically different ones, it would still be hard to be completely compatible and have very radically different results. Like, it's just mean like humans aren't that different all the time. Okay, no doubt the specifics of the pure coherence view need work. What matters here is that its solution to the problem of disagreement echoes that of the revised empirical model, and like that model, it buys its refusal of skepticism at the cost of epistemic egoism. Faced with the problem of disagreement, the pure coherence view maintains that I am justified in sustaining my moral beliefs insofar as they belong to a coherent system of moral beliefs. Again, who the fuck knows if their system is coherent? No one really knows that. They're just claiming that because they like that. You ignore things that you don't like. No one fucking, yeah, seriously. Alright, excuse me, continuing. Even if I know that your beliefs are very different from mine, and apart from those differences, I have no more evidence of my reliability than yours, again, you're going to have this, as Aris just pointed out. So, like there's every line here, it's almost like there's things you can disagree with. But now recall the qualified reflection principle for conditional credence. If S knows that he would be justified in believing P in circumstance Q, then he is already justified in being conditionally confident of P given Q, so long as he has no reason to think that his evidence in Q would be misleading. Yeah, so if you think in this situation I would believe this, then you said given this, then I would believe it. Okay, that's fine. To avoid complications about evidential defeat and undermining, we ask what I would be justified in believing apart from the evidence given my actual beliefs. We can make this vivid if we imagine that I am reflecting on morality before I have beliefs about its content. As before, this need not be possible. The point is to focus on antecedent justification. This is talking to Aris. Okay, Aris can answer them. If I know the truth of the pure coherence view, I know that my moral beliefs will be justified so long as they are coherent, even if your equally coherent beliefs are different and I have, apart from those differences, no more evidence of my reliability than yours. It follows by the reflection principle that I am already justified in being conditionally confident of any moral outlook, given that it is coherently believed by me and not you. In other words, even apart from the evidence supplied by my actual beliefs, I am justified in believing that my moral outlook is more likely to be correct than yours if both are equally coherent. Say this is like equally coherent. What the fuck does that mean? That my beliefs are a more reliable guide to the moral facts. And since the situation is symmetric, you are justified in believing the same about yours. In resisting the challenge of moral disagreement, the moral theorist is forced once again into epistemic egoism. Alright, so there's nothing different here than again just arguing that if we each have our intuitions and these things are opaque and you start off from them, you don't have to believe anyone else's because that's what you're starting from. Yeah, Shane, this is getting circular. This is absolutely getting a bit circular about the epistemic egoism, but I think this is where he wanted to go. Yeah. Well, to be fair to this author, Shane, you're surprised at the concept of moral facts. In this area, they are assuming moral facts. This is that's not actually under argument here. We're assuming that there's things that like you're going to call a moral fact because the people that this author is talking about, they kind of are in that area. So yes, that's questionable, but like that's not that is not the particular problem with this paper. Okay. So basically, if you start off with the idea of that intuitions are fundamental, you're going to get into moral egoism because you're always going to be able to defend your own intuitions. Yeah, but I mean, also it's fucking hilarious that he has to make a whole new phrase of epistemic egoism for the word bias. Yeah, but I mean, again, you're talking to philosophers. They love their neologisms. Like, neologisms are like, I'm sure a philosopher came up with that word just to mean a word, to make up a word about new terms. Like, because that's just what philosophers like to do. So I'm not like, again, I can't be, because if I'm going to yell at them for being pretentious, then like I'm going to just get yelled at for being pretentious when I'm pretentious. So again, like, yes, you were right, but no, that's not the particular problem with this essay. The particular problem with this essay is the circular arguments. Sociologists use that sort of shit too. Yeah, I mean, this is if you're an academic, you're gonna make neologisms. It's just comes with the it's a business hazard, being pretentious. We might ask how this argument differs from the standard objection that epistemic coherence theories fail to connect justification with truth. Viper says, the fact that everyone's pissed off at this paper makes me feel closer to you all. Yeah, well, blame Aris. He suggested it. After all, that objection is often pressed by noting the apparent possibility of distinct and conflicting systems of coherent belief, most of which would have to be false. How could it be anything more than luck that my beliefs are not just coherent but correct? Shane says, not in history. Our pretension is finding an old-ass word that no one uses anymore and try to make it cool again. See, that's at least fun. I know anthropologists sometimes make up more stories than they should, and that's not good. Like, oh, this is how people are living because we found this tool here and they must have been using it. But like, if you can find a cool old word, that's fun. Is there a moral through line in history other than might makes right? People don't read, Vipers. There's always people don't read. Maybe that's not moral, but like that's always a through line in history. No one reads. People are idiots. Yeah. Yeah, so now we're talking about epistemic luck, or moral luck. How is it that everyone thinks that their beliefs are moral and correct? The answer lies in a contrast already drawn between the proposition that our basic faculties are reliable and the proposition that ours are more reliable than others when their output diverges. A principle of interpretive charity on which our beliefs necessarily tend towards the truth or on which they tend to count as knowledge would begin to account for reliability as something more than accidental, perhaps given an a priori grounds for trusting our perceptual and intellectual faculties. In doing so, it would help to dissolve the standard objection to epistemologies of pure coherence. It would, however, do nothing at all to explain how each of us could be justified without evidence in taking ourselves to be more reliable than others when our moral intuitions or beliefs diverge. Aris says most people don't agree with might make right. They just lament that the world operates like that. Well, I think that's what Viper's point was, that this is how it's been. These arguments put us finally in a position to say why and how moral theory corrupts youth. It does so by tacitly or explicitly invoking epistemic theories, the empirical model perhaps revised, the pure coherence view on which it is impossible to block the skeptical problem of moral disagreement without appeal to unacceptable forms of epistemic egoism. If our pedagogy instructs our students in one or other of these epistemologies, their loss of faith when confronted with a diversity of moral intuitions and moral outlooks in Ethics 101 is, as Bayer claimed, not only predictable but sensible. Resisting or failing to see the temptations of egoism in epistemology, they follow our epistemic standards in paralyzing doubt. Alright, so this was all a setup because the author wants to they made these crap theories and then say, well, yes, if you have all these crap theories, then people are not going to care what our moral theories say, and then they're going to just do whatever they want because they're going to not have good theories. Now, hopefully, see, the problem is with this. You might want to think that, okay, the author is like, okay, this was a setup, and now they're going to show you the way out because that's the next section. It's just that the arguments presented in the previous section don't lead me to think that there's going to be better arguments in this section. Alright. And I am starting to lose my mind. So let's see, we got this is page 11. And we got to get, we only got to get a few more pages. Only got to get to page 14. Okay, that's fine. I was afraid I had to get to like 17 here. Yep. Almost done. Alright, so I'm just, like, no, I can't even claim to be hopeful. I was going to say I was hopeful that there'll be something more clever here, but I just, based on the argumentation up to this point, I'm not that hopeful. Okay, before the prosecution rests, we need to consider a possible gap in the case against moral theory. The verdict of corruption is premature unless we have at least a rough conception of how to respond to moral disagreement without skepticism. If the skeptical conclusion is true, it is no defect in the moral theorist epistemology that it respects this fact. Here we must ask, in abstract terms, what justifies moral beliefs? In doing so, we adopt the mild evidentialism that figured in the background of the empirical model above. According to this framework, there is a relation one can bear to certain propositions or psychological states, which thereby constitutes one's evidence and to which one's degrees of belief should be proportioned. Assuming that evidence can be classified as moral or non-moral, the possibilities are these. 1. Certain attitudes with moral content provide us with evidence to which our moral beliefs should be proportioned, though in order to avoid problems of Section 2, the attitudes cannot be identified with mere beliefs or with moral intuitions as intellectual seemings. Alright, so we've got content. So with certain attitudes, like if we don't like something, that provides us with the content of disliking it as and sort of a moral dislike. 2. Our non-moral evidence supports some moral beliefs in contrast to others. That is, the proportions by which one's beliefs should track one's evidence are not a matter of simple coherence, but of accepting the moral conclusions made probable by non-moral claims about one's circumstance. Alright, so like basically, if your friend dies, as in the evidence in the example the paper gave above, and you don't like that someone killed your friend, the fact that it was your friend that died, that can inform you that like what the person did was bad, because your friend shouldn't have gotten murdered. Okay, so like something else, like accidents of history can inform you. And 3, some moral beliefs are epistemically but non-evidentially justified. Our justification for holding them does not rest on evidence of their truth. Shane says, this person totally lost me. The whole field of epistemology is built around the concept of skepticism, so we're supposed to make sure that we don't practice skepticism on morality lest we end up doing epistemology. Total dumbass lack of logic there. This is like not a terrible philosopher. I've seen this person around before, I think. I don't think I've read a whole bunch of their stuff, but like I'm gonna hold back on saying that they've completely shot themselves in the foot at this point. Yeah, like this is the problem. I just don't know where they're going yet with this. We haven't gotten far enough into this way out section yet for me to figure out what they're doing here. So we'll find out. There's like they may do something clever yet. Alright, so the questions raised by these ideas are too large to examine in detail here, but we can make some See, this is the sneaky thing. But we can make some preliminary notes. So this is what they did. They're hand waving in big theories, but then they're gonna like cherry pick some of the things they want to talk about. And so like this is why they may have lost you, but like that's because this is sort of a strategy to get to talk about what they want to talk about. Yeah, Araceli, this guy's well regarded. He wrote some popular books, one called Midlife and one called Life is Hard. Yeah, he's a little bit popular. You're gonna go to bed? Oh, good night, Ann. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope to see you soon. Yep, have a great night, Ann. Alright. In many ways, the simplest position is to develop option 2, and that's the non-moral evidence things, like accidents can inform us about what is moral. According to a plausible doctrine of supervenience, I hate supervenience. Oh my god, why does this person have to like do all the dumb things all at once? According to a plausible doctrine of supervenience, each moral proposition is entailed by a series of non-moral descriptions to which disjunction is strictly equivalent. The proponent of 2 may hold that such descriptions give conclusive evidence of the corresponding moral claim. Okay, so basically what they're saying is if you have a whole bunch of things like grouped together, this or this or this or this or this or this or this, and that would be that's evidence for a moral claim. Like all of these things come together, and then you can sort of say all that is what leads to a moral claim. It is depends what area you're in, Vipers. I was in a philosophy of physics conference once, and they would basically call out and do like mean things. So other places like it depends. You can actually heckle sometimes. All right. For the most part, however, we make moral judgments with only partial knowledge of the non-moral circumstances, and our ignorance or conjecture extends to matters that would make moral differences. Yeah, so if you have like all the circumstances together, this or this or this, then you can sort of decide which one's the best one. In that case, our evidence is defeasible. It supports M just to the extent that it supports the disjunction, which is A or B or C or D, of non-moral propositions that is equivalent to M. So all the ones that, all those that count as M. Knowing right from wrong on the basis of such defeasible evidence requires a capacity to tell whether other facts about circumstances are likely to be relevant, and that depends on knowledge of the non-moral workings of the world. Yeah, so if you know all the stuff and all the different options, you can pick which one's better. That's basically all this says. There is scope for an argument that takes us from 2 to 3. Suppose that N is non-moral evidence for a moral proposition M, and that I'm justified in believing M on the basis of N. Alright, so you have all the stuff, like your intuition say this is right, and you have all the different options laid out in front of you. You can say these are the good ones. According to a natural though controversial principle, I must have an antecedent justification to believe that if N, then M. If this belief is justified by further evidence N prime, then we can apply the principle again. At some point, we are bound to find a moral claim that is epistemically justified without evidence, as in 3. This would be a form of intuitionism, very different from the ones that were criticized in section 2. Yeah, so if you go through all your options and you say, look, you take out all the sort of non-moral things, you're going to get to something that is like a ground belief that you don't have any accidental evidence for. Viper says the worst place to heckle must be a ghost phobia support group. Boo. Oh, that's terrible, Vipers. Terrible. Finally, it might be argued that non-evidentially justified beliefs provide us with evidence. It is not clear to me that this argument is sound, but it is also not clear to me how to articulate a more plausible version of one. For instance, it does not help to suggest with Williamson that the attitude of knowledge provides us with evidence, even when its content is a moral proposition. This is making the argument of big numbers. Yeah, this is not a good argument. I mean, the idea that you can just separate out all the accidents of history and then you're going to run into like something that is not accidental. There's no reason to believe that. But yeah, it's like the idea that this would ever happen, like this makes no sense. And it would, again, it's idealistic. Do you think that it's even possible and that it could happen? Like even the possibility of any of this actually happening is very idealistic. Like why would this work in the real world? That this could even be a procedure that would terminate in any way. It's like Vipers. Could you make a program that eliminates all of the axioms it needs until it runs out of them? It's like I'm not sure you can do that. Like it might always be moving around. Yeah, see, infinite time and infinite examples. Yeah, I don't think this is the idea that you can like make a program that would terminate or do this even just like a human could do this. It doesn't really track. Okay. All right, so could you actually have knowledge that would give you moral insight? For we can still ask how or on what grounds a moral proposition is known. Like, could you know a moral proposition? Barring circularity or regress, we must eventually appeal to moral knowledge that rests on some other source of moral evidence, on non-moral evidence, or no evidence at all. Yeah, this is back to your intuitions. These remarks suggest that the options distinguished above as 1 to 3 may not be as various as they seem. In light of their convergence, we can say what kind of epistemology would solve the problem of moral disagreement. Focusing on 2 and 3, it would be an epistemology in which the fundamental standard of justification, either of proportioning beliefs to non-moral evidence or of believing without evidence, favor some moral outlook over others. In particular, they favor moral outlooks that apply moral concepts correctly on the basis of non-moral facts. Moral epistemology is biased toward the truth. Shane says the problem here is that he's arguing it is possible that a person could work this out in a paper where he's talking about a very narrow window of time where two people are having a disagreement. Yeah, this is Shane says, am I just supposed to ask the person to wait X time for me to sort out my retort? Well, the deep problem here is that from right at the get-go, and we all, I mean, you weren't here, but like everyone that was here, I think recognized that basically if you're just going to rely on intuitions, you're going to say, well, it's going to come down to what I believe or these intuitions, and then all these procedures are just trying to like get at the intuitions. But the assumption that you can get at them or that they even exist in this way is basically assumed. And so the idea that like, oh, you can just wait to like let me refine what I'm saying to get my intuitions, yeah, that's not going to happen. But the problem is that they started from the position where this was even a possibility that you could get at them, and now they're trying to like dress it up by saying, oh yeah, you could get at them through this procedure, but like that's already begged the question. Phil Papers has an API business idea, custom printed toilet paper. You know, the people who run this, they know the amount of crap that gets published. They'd probably get a joke out of that. They'd most likely laugh. Like, they'd be like, yep. But this is why I want to have a review thing. I need to come up with a stinker emote. Like, this is a stinker. You'd think it was good, but it was a stinker, and I need to come up with some clever emotes. If anyone out there has emote ideas for like how I should review this, like the concepts, like what is a philosophical stinker? I need like a emote idea for this. Shane says, I wonder if Ben Shapiro has ever read this paper because that's how he argues. You disagree with him on something moral and he just starts dumping out the Gish Gallop examples that are non-moral evidence to support his moral stance. I mean, I don't think so. I doubt that he was reading this sort of paper, but, you know, like it's a known strategy to sort of talk this way. And like I said, the idea that you're starting from intuitions, that's like, people do that though. So... yeah, maybe that's really it. They're starting from a similar spot. I doubt Ben Shapiro read this paper, but they're starting from a similar position in moral philosophy, and that's why they have like similar strategies going on. Yeah, like the idea that moral epistemology is biased to the truth is like, okay, come on, please, like just seriously, based on what you assumed, yes, but like it's not, this is not a conclusion. This is just a reiteration saying that your moral epistemology is biased to the truth because it's an intuition, and if the intuition exists, then it is something that could be right or wrong, and you're assuming that it is correct, then it is going to be true. But they've both assumed the existence and the correctness of their intuitions from the get-go. Of course it's biased to the truth if that's your assumption about what your intuitions are in moral epistemology. So again, we haven't gotten anywhere, just repeating this shit. Continuing, the situation of those who confront disagreement is thus potentially asymmetric. In the hypothetical case considered in Section 2, we should not defer to the advocates of slavery, misogyny, or injustice, however coherent they are, if the non-moral evidence in fact supports our beliefs, or if those beliefs are non-evidentially justified. By contrast, they should never have held their awful opinions, nor should they do so now. It matters who is wrong and who is right. Epistemically egoist. Yeah, I think that's that catchphrase of the day for this one. This conclusion about what is involved in resisting the challenge of moral disagreement helps to motivate and clarify some obscure images in moral philosophy, that the standards of justification for moral beliefs are internal to morality, that there is no scope for external critique. Such claims are hard to interpret and easy in read in ways that make them seem implausible or banal. For instance, as endorsements of a pure coherence view as conflating moral and epistemic reasons, or as reminding us that reflection must begin with our own beliefs. The substantive truth in the vicinity is that moral education is education, not only in the space of moral reasons, but into the space of reasons for and against moral beliefs. Yeah, because what they're saying is that you have to go, what I think the other just said here is that you have to look at all the other things, and once you get all the other things, then you will get the answer. There's no reason why awful opinions won't like fit with all the other like accidental non-moral beliefs. Like this is again just like begging the question yet again. It's like this is a little driving me crazy, but whatever. So yeah, it's like is that moral education is education? Of course. What are you educating the people? That's the whole point. If you educate the people like bad things, then that's going to be how people reason, and that will again be the right answer according to them. You had higher hopes for Setiya? Yeah. Well, this is just a weird paper. It's very strange. Let me say one thing actually. This is highly, highly sophisticated argumentation in terms of the metaphysics. Like the structure of the metaphysical, like the background argument here, isn't stupid. Like this is a clever way of getting a moral result out of like some analytic philosophy. And so I can see why analytic philosophers like this, because it looks like you're squeezing moral results out of like analysis. And there's a few papers we've gone through like this, very well argued in terms of the background theory of not the background theory, the structure of the argumentation. There is some high level argumentation going on here, because to talk about these things in these ways and get any results out of them is impressive. The problem is we nailed him on the fundamentals very early on. If you don't nail him on the fundamentals very early on, you could get caught up into the argumentation, and that's what I think analytic philosophers, this is, what they do. They get, ooh, look at that clever argument where you can like get moral results out of like basically not doing anything, just like, arguing. Like that's what they like. Okay. See, as McDowell writes, ethical thinking is local in two ways. See, you can see it right here. This is the immediate thing. You're talking about ethical thought, but you're not talking about ethics. And so it looks like you've got good results, even though you haven't actually dealt with like ethical theories. Ethical thinking is local in two ways. You can see it just in the way they're talking. Local. What the fuck does local have to do with ethical thinking? First, its characteristic concepts are not intelligible independently of particular cultural perspectives. All right, so they've just done relativism. And second, it aims explicitly or implicitly to be directed by standards of good and bad argument, and the standards available to it are not independent of its own substantive and disputable conclusions. Yeah, so again, and then it's like, okay, so it's relative and it's subject to philosophical analysis, like basically analytic philosophy. This is what they want. And so this is what they argued for, and now they get to have what they want. But yeah. The deepest mistake of the moral theorist is the assumption that moral thought has the same epistemology as empirical science, that the fundamental standards of epistemic justification are topic neutral. This is what we have to deny in order to explain how we can be justified in maintaining our beliefs in the face of radical disagreement. We must hold that, at the most basic level, non-moral evidence supports particular moral beliefs, ones that tend to be correct, or that such beliefs are justified without evidence. Of course, there is no guarantee that we are in the right. Perhaps our interlocutors' beliefs are justified while ours are not. We have no way to address that question that is independent of whether their beliefs are true. But so it goes. There are no guarantees in the epistemology of any beliefs. We do the best we can. And here's just like the ducking out at the end, like, well, we're doing the best we can here. Oh, man. Let's just finish this up. We've got one more page. That's it. Despite their schematic character, these reflections afford some purchase on the question that inspired my interest in moral theory, and to which I return in closing. What is the role of coherence in moral epistemology? Granting the significance of outright inconsistency as an argument against a moral outlook, do structural features like simplicity, power, and explanatory depth count as arguments in favor? This is the fallback position for the moral theorist, although it needs to be supplemented and not by the moral intuitions of the empirical model. Coherence is part of what matters in the justification of moral beliefs. Yeah, this is just repeating your, suck the analytic philosophy dick. Like, this is basically what we're doing here. So, okay. If that is so, we can continue to argue for active utilitarianism by appeal to its simplicity, even if the argument is not decisive, and we can argue against common sense morality on the ground that it is incoherent, superficial, complicated mess. Once we reject the empirical model and the pure coherence view, however, what is the motivation for giving coherence even this subsidiary role? If the analogy between moral thinking and scientific theory has failed, we can ask with Bernard Williams, why should theoretical simplicity and its criteria be appropriate? In particular, having acknowledged that the epistemic standards that govern moral belief favor certain moral outlooks, again begging the question, and in the sense in that sense have moral content, it is not clear that we need coherence to pick up the epistemic slack. Although I have not argued directly against coherence in the technical sense, simplicity, power, explanatory depth, as an epistemic virtue of moral thought, I hope that the course of this paper presents it in a new light. The idea that we should defer to coherence in moral thought is not the inevitable application of rational standards that are everywhere at home, but a questionable version of the shape of morality and moral virtue. But a questionable vision of the shape of morality and moral virtue. Yeah. It is, I think, the vision that animates depictions of the moral philosopher as moral expert. In particular, such depictions may rest on nothing more than the philosopher's luxury of time to think and to investigate non-moral facts, or her relative immunity to the unsound arguments that explain at least some of our moral opinions. But they may also rest on the idea that thinking well about morality is thinking coherently, again in the technical sense, and that philosophical training nurtures one's aptitude for this. If we doubt that coherence has great significance in moral epistemology, this reasoning will seem misguided. Philosophical education is not a source of moral wisdom, except in indirect ways. We can then accept what is at least the evidence of my experience that philosophers are not much better at knowing how to live than anyone else. Yes. Okay. So it ended on the egoist sense, and that like if you're going to try to be coherent, you're not going to get out of this. Said nothing else. Oh yeah, just so tepid. That's exactly right, Aris. It's like they just didn't get anywhere. It's like, yeah, okay. If you assume that you can only rely on your intuitions, then yeah, you're just not going to get anywhere because the intuitions are going to be everyone has their own, and that's it. And they said nothing. Now, I mean, as a negative paper, like, okay, did anyone actually think that all these other things that kind of got like, ugly in the process, did they actually think they were important? No one thought like that these were like the most important things going on. No one was thinking, oh yeah, analytic coherence is really the most important thought for moral philosophy. Viper says, Googled Setiya, he's from Hull. This would have been way more entertaining read in that accent. Yeah, he's from somewhere over there, isn't he? Yeah, I apologize, my accents. When I was a kid, I was good at accents. I'm not good at accents anymore. Used to be. Yeah. I mean, the problem is, does moral theory corrupt youth? And like they argue the answer is yes. Like right there. This is cutesy. You'd think like this would be like, a fun paper. Instead, he sucked all the life out of it. Unfortunately, I said everything that needed to be said early because unless you guys want to talk about like the cleverness of getting moral results out of like this analytic philosophy where you don't actually talk about any moral theory, that you can corrupt people morally without actually talking about moral theories by epistemic skepticism, that we won't be able to have any values because we will always be with skepticism. I mean, you can just reductio that. Like, no one actually thinks that. Yeah, man, what a misleading title. Great lead with Anscombe interview, and then it went nowhere. Yeah. This is a lot of flash and no substance. Because, like, yeah, it's a good topic. And that's it. So, like, basically, well, to be fair, Aris, great lead with the Anscombe interview. This is basically ripping off Anscombe. Like, yeah, Anscombe did something cool in a public philosophy sense where you do want to have a moral philosophy, like thing. And he just basically ripped her off and then did nothing afterwards. I mean, good on him for getting a paper published. But, like, it's just disappointing because you think, like, good at philosophy might have something to say. Instead, just basically repeated himself for 18 pages. Shane says, we can't assume that Noger was being morally insensitive when he said somewhere over there because we can't assume that his intuition is saying that it was more immoral without exercising our own epistemic egoism. Exactly. But, I mean, technically, Hull is... That's north, south. Yeah, so somewhere over there. That way, Hull. Well, Vipers, that's what I want to do. I want to get, that's exact. I used to email the authors the link when I put it on YouTube, and, they'd watch a lot of times. But that was also before when I was being much more charitable. I'm less charitable now than I was. Like, I wouldn't have been this mean, like, 200 episodes ago. But, like, that's what I want to do. Like, I want to get myself some emotes. So instead of, like, just like this and like this and like this, like, we'll have some, like, navel gazing, like a circularity. Oh, that's a good one. Circularity emote. Circular emote. So yeah, like, so we could then then I could be like, all right, this is what like you have, and I'm gonna have it so basically at the end of but Ouroboros is cool. Like, I'd have to have one that's like makes it look stupid, like a stupid circle or something. Like, you just beg the question or whatever. And then what I'll have is that at the end of, when I publish this stuff, I'll have like a little button. It'll, build a web page and just upload it. And then we'll have reviews off this. Yeah. Well, Aris, of course. Setiya is a full professor at MIT, should be able to take some criticism. Yeah, no one gives a fuck what I think. And of course, as a full professor at MIT, he does, like, of course he has a thicker skin. He should be able to. But, I'm sure he doesn't give a fuck about this paper. He didn't get full professorship for writing something like this about ethics. Shane says, nope, you can't justify your moral intuition with non-moral facts like direction because you didn't also take all the other possible non-moral pieces of evidence into account. What about the curvature of the earth? Just because you think something is east doesn't mean it actually is. Thank you, Shane, for that. Yeah. So... yeah, I gotta have some more ideas for emotes. So yeah, please, like, if anyone has ideas, like this circularity emote's good. Like if you have a concept for a wisdom emote, like something's actually a good paper, like, ooh, this was wise, that would be good. But yeah, then I'll make it so then we can have actual reviews, and then like I'll have a auto publishing system to Vipers. If you know about like static web page publishing systems, I'm gonna have one of those. So like it'll just grab all the information, I'll hit a button, and it'll just push to GitHub pages, and it'll just like go up. So, but that's the goal for like maybe the next 6 months in like philosophy roulette or whatever. See if I can get some emotes. I've got the rest of it basically worked out. But yeah. Do we have anything else we need to say about this? Like, this wasn't poorly written. It was okay. It did one of the, like, it was very good with pulling in, like, lots of quotes from different people. So it demonstrates really good knowledge of stuff. But again, this is all like, hey, you can play the analytic philosophy game really well. Yeah. Chico? Well, I don't know what that is. Sorry, Vipers. Crap in, crap out. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like I said, technically really not bad. The problem is, this is one of those, you did something that was outside of your area. Shane says, I can run with the ideas and bullshit and chat with the principles so it's not incoherent. No. It's just not applicable in real terms. Absolutely. That's the thing. This is a competent philosopher who just went outside their area to do something that they thought sounded clever, and that we're just calling the bullshit, though. Yeah. Because this is what happens. You get a lot of skills and you can write papers, and I was saying this the other week. I don't know if I was saying it on the stream, but I have friends who have an 8-year-old, and I was arguing that I have no bones. And she was annoyed that, like, what do you mean you have no bones? And she was like, of course they would think it's clever, Aris. But, like, that's the problem. They're looking at it in terms of analytic philosophy, but, yeah. Well, Shane, this guy is a very skilled philosopher. It's just, I think he's outside of his, area, and he tried to say something, and basically he's just not clever at ethics, and so he ends up saying something very stupid but in a very clever way. But like, I was arguing with this 8-year-old that I have no bones. Like, for some reason we got on this topic, I have no bones, and I can maintain a fucking argument that I have no bones. Like, I can, for indefinite amounts of time, especially against an 8-year-old, because they're just not that skilled. But that's what's happening here. It's like he can make a very skilled argument in very technical philosophy, because very few people are going to be able to cut through the opacity of technical analytic philosophy. And it's like the people here in chat, we're going to figure out that it's wrong, but like a lot of people, even other professional philosophers, are going to be wowed by the presentation. And he did a very good job at that. As Aris said, this start is excellent, and it completely failed after that. Once he actually had to say anything himself, it went downhill. But like, if you're looking at how he said it and not what he said, then you can be easily fooled. So, but yeah, like, very few people can write anything like this, Shane. That's kind of the point, is that very, very few people can write anything like this. It's basically philosophy professors trained in the analytic tradition, and only some of them. So, like, I can't write this paper. Could I? I wouldn't, first of all. But like, it would just take a ton of effort. Like, I could write something. Yeah, I can write something somewhat technically similar, but like, this guy has way more knowledge than me, and so all these quotes, all this sort of like these nice like vignettes where he's talking about like these like little inline quotes, like right here, like that, this block right here, like a nice block from Thomas Nagel. This is the sort of thing, like, it's just really good. Shane says, I think there's got to be some sociology here. People see his name and they shut off some of their own critique. I wonder if this would be accepted if someone like me submitted it. Shane, what Aris said is correct. Most of the time, I don't know this journal, Philosophical Topics, most of the time in philosophy is blind review. And so the people reading the paper did not know who wrote it. But what Aris said is right. He kissed all the right philosophical ass in the paper. And this is why I was saying, like, I could write something equally technical, maybe, but I would not do it with this skill and panache, basically, that he has here. And that's what got it. He's writing like a really skilled philosophy professor, and they can see that. So it wasn't his name. It was, in some sense, the skill with which it was written. And the problem is the people who were reading it weren't as good at calling the bullshit in terms of the ethics. Yeah, that's right, Shane. Followed the right formula. It would definitely get accepted, just like Aris said. Yeah, polished turd. Is philosophy the only field where experts are subject to the Dunning-Kruger effect about philosophy? How would I know, Vipers? So yeah, this is a very well polished but not very good paper. So that's what it is. And it's not a bad paper because of any of like all the arguments can be justified in the point that they are. It's just the starting point was terrible because he didn't actually have any insight into ethics. He just had insight into the structure of an ethical argument, which doesn't have connection to reality. Yeah, well, that's the thing, Aris. It's like, again, the people he's talking to all talk like this. Sparkly shit. There we go. Now we're making progress. Thank you, Vipers. Sparkly shit. Sparkle. It'll be called Sparkle Poo. Ooh, golden turd. That's good too.